Hello everyone and welcome to this session on working with your supervisor. My name is Gilliam and I'm the researcher developer for the Arts and Humanities and Social Sciences, and I'm joined by two of my colleagues. Guys, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Sam Byers. I'm a researcher developer for Life Sciences.
And hello, I'm Sonja Tomašković. I'm a researcher developer for Physical Sciences and School of Technology.
Great. So as the title suggests, today we're going to briefly talk about working with your supervisor, and partly in response to the current situation vis-a-vis working and researching from home. So guys, what do you think would be the first thing to cover really in terms of working with your supervisor?
For me, I think that it's important for us to still recognise that there are going to be priority differences. So when you started your PhD is your baby. You're growing, you're growing it, you're gestating it. It's you're all consumed by it. And the other work that perhaps is going on in the lab is effectively small fry. It's not as important to you. Your supervisor has priorities as well. They need to keep the lab going, grant applications, publications, etc. These are all really important for them, and there is this you're a small part of their priorities. That priority difference is still visible even though we're working from home, and it's important that we maintain an effective communication stream with our supervisor, particularly at the moment, because we can't just go and knock on their door. We don't see them in the lab. They're at their house, you're at your home, so we need to be more proactive in communicating with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would say the first thing is to keep communicating. Whatever the situation is, whatever relationship you have, it's really important to kind of keep in touch on a regular basis. Again, this proactivity comes to my mind, and if your supervisor doesn't kind of make some sort of regular appointments and meetings with you, online meetings and so on, then you take the charge of that and just say, okay, let's meet every week or every 2 weeks, or whatever kind of schedule you feel it's relevant and it's important for you in order to be supported. I think that's fine, whatever suits you. So it's really important, again, to keep communicating with your supervisor, but also with other researchers in your lab, other PhD students, other postdocs, perhaps. Again, it's for your own sort of well-being, but also just to keep in touch with research that is going on, because people will just continue doing things that they can from home. So it would be good to kind of keep track of what is happening. In terms of communicating, again, emails are okay, but because there is no, as Sam was saying, meeting next to the kind of coffee machine in a lab or so, it would be good to have a sort of face-to-face in a way, or Skype or Teams or Zoom meetings and so on, because sometimes I think things in emails can be just misinterpreted or not very clear, and then this kind of a conversation, actually talking to someone, will help that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I often refer to them as the small and informal conversations that you have. So as you say, you might be walking past their office, or you're making a coffee in the shared kitchen. Those sort of small interactions, anecdotally, I believe, can be more conducive to your research, or at least in building your conceptual apparatus and your broader ideas. And sometimes you don't quite get that with emails. So I definitely agree. If you can ensure that you're having relatively frequent communication with your supervisor, that's not just via email, I think that would be healthy and helpful for your project. Just, help you reflect on what you're doing.
And perhaps just going back to the point of maintaining communication with your lab as well, so postdocs and PhDs, the students that are also in your lab, perhaps think about if you haven't already set one up, perhaps a Slack channel. So Slack is a great way to have a communication thread which is unofficial or not potentially as work related as perhaps having a Teams meeting would be, or a Zoom meeting. So, and I've found in the past that having that kind of more social communication stream, lots of ideas can be formulated in a more relaxed environment.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you put that much better than me. I think that's exactly, having that relaxed environment to formulate ideas, I think, is key.
I think once you, just going back to kind of meetings with you and working with your supervisor, once you do have agree, when your meeting is taking place and so on, I would say, as with any meeting, face to face, any kind of meeting, it would be again the same. Make some sort of agenda, what you want to discuss, be kind of to the point, because again, you won't have unlimited time because we are all at home. It will still be 1 hour, 30 minutes or so on. So make an agenda, be kind of clear what you want to discuss, what do you need from that meeting. I would say keep notes during that meeting. And at the end of it, summarize what you discussed, if there are any action points, who is doing what and when, and so on. And then, of course, share those as well to kind of get agreement from a supervisor, whoever else was in that meeting. And again, I think having this regular contact with supervisor, just to kind of reiterate that, it really helps with your own motivation, because very easily I would find I would decide to do something and think, oh, doesn't really matter, I'm not going to see my supervisor, so it's fine. But actually, the fact that you have these regular meetings, that can be also motivational for you to actually complete certain tasks in order to share them with your supervisor, get some feedback, and then move on to a next task as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having some kind of written record of your meetings, which should include an agenda and the notes, the summaries, and especially those action points, are crucial. Human memory is highly fallible. And I think we've all experienced moments where we feel like we're repeating time, or we're in something like Groundhog Days, or we just end up having the same conversations with our supervisors. Or we think something's been agreed, or we interpreted something as being agreed a certain way, only to find out a month or two later that we completely got the wrong end of the stick and misunderstood. All those kind of problems can be avoided if you're just keeping track of things. And they don't have to be these exhaustive, highly formalized agendas and notes. It's just some kind of written document. They can be as short or long as you like, but just have something to refer back to that can give you something to follow. Something for your supervisors to follow, and just avoid any kind of ambiguities and so forth. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
I think it's probably also worth just noting at the moment, if perhaps you're in a position where your relationship with your supervisor is perhaps a little bit strained. I'm going to reflect now on my relationship with my supervisor when I was doing my PhD. We had a strained relationship, and when I didn't have to talk to him, I didn't. I actively moved away from having to engage with my supervisor. Reflecting on that now, that wasn't the best idea at certain parts of my PhD. It didn't help my PhD progress. Being at home and not having that opportunity to engage with your supervisor on a daily basis, if you have got a strained relationship, can make you feel a bit more relaxed almost, because you may feel, oh, I don't really have to get in touch. But it is important to be active at this point, and actively engage with your supervisor. Perhaps in order to do that, to get yourself into that routine, perhaps think of a reward that you can give yourself, a bar of chocolate or a cup of tea or a nice glass of wine or something like that, to help you actually engage with your supervisor, because it's important to note that supervisors aren't mind readers. Unfortunately, during your PhD, you aren't taught to mind read. It's the one downside to doing a PhD, I think. And so if you don't talk to them, they may assume, particularly when they're really busy, that you're okay. So actively engage with them, even if your relationship is slightly strained. And like I said, perhaps think about a reward just to start with, to get you into the notion of being more proactive and speaking to your supervisor on a regular basis.
I think that's excellent advice, and it is strange, isn't it, that it's something students, and I speak from my own experience, students can take for granted that somehow the supervisor is going to read the mind or just know how things are going, but really they won't. So don't let a problem get too big until you bring it up. It's better to just speak to things as early as possible, and that requires proactive communication. So just express how things are going for you, and be honest too. Don't feel that you need to abide by some kind of arcane identity of what a scholar should be like, and whipping yourself in the back and whatever else, to prove your worth. If you're struggling with something and it's not working for you, just be quite functional and practical about it. Do what it takes to make it work for you. And a lot of that will require the input of your supervisor. And that's precisely what they're there to do. You're not there to perform for them. So, be very open in that communication too, because ultimately that's going to be to the benefit of your project and your well-being.
Absolutely. And I think a reminder, I'm sure you know that, so I don't want to sound patronizing there, but at the end of the day, it is your PhD. It's not your supervisors, it's primarily yours. It's your responsibility, it's your work. You are there to kind of run it, to push it, and to complete it at the end of the day. Okay, so it's in your interest then, whatever relationship you have with your supervisor, that you get them on board, so they are actually there to support you. Okay, so again, going back, communicating with them is kind of key to that actually happening.
I suppose just on that point, I'll just briefly mention something I bring up in my in-person sessions on working with your supervisor, and that's just on the relationship space. I mean, you could use other sort of metaphors, it don't just have to be spatial, but really it's the idea that the relationship you have with your supervisor can be plotted or categorized in some way for sure, but that it also evolves and changes, generally speaking, according to what year of study you're in. But of course, it's not a linear process necessarily. So what I'm really saying is that at the beginning of your studies, you're more likely and expected to be somewhat dependent on your supervisor, and your supervisor in return is likely to be directive. It's not always the case, but usually that's how it goes. But then over time, the ideal, at least, is that you start to become more independent, in which case the supervisor is more facilitative. Okay, and then at the end, you've got your PhD. That means you've been granted that license for autonomy, that license to be an independent researcher. So in theory, at least, that would mean you no longer need a supervisor. So that's really what we're aiming for. But it's a process. It's an evolution, sure, there's an end point, but it's not always smooth, and you'll have times where maybe you're a bit more dependent than you would have liked to be, and that's normal. Research never goes according to plan, ever, for anybody, regardless of discipline. There are always unknowns, and actually it's learning to grapple those unknowns in collaboration with your supervisor that accounts for one of the core, if you like, skills or competencies that you require and enhance whilst doing a PhD. Right. Anyway, I think that's more or less summarised our main points. Just to see if there's anything else, Sam or Sonja, you want to bring up before we wrap up.
No, just to be proactive, keep communicating, so that your research project can still keep going forward, even though you're not in the lab. I'm referring to life science and STEM here, and yeah, keep communicating. So keep your project moving forward, and also for your own well-being, it's really important that we look after ourselves at this moment in time, and talking is a big help.
I would just add to that, ask for help. If you need help with your research, with anything else, do ask for help. That's the job of your supervisor, is there to support you and help you. So if you feel that you're not doing well and things are not progressing in the way you wanted it, yes, just ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing really more to add to that. I think those points sum it up nicely. So with that, we'll I guess we say goodbye for now, and see you in another video or in a virtual one-to-one. To remember that we offer those. And in the meantime, if you have any other questions or concerns, then you can contact us at the usual email address.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.